Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Yes, I hope you're all away having fun in the vans during the summer break. For us, we've just come back from a short weekend away, but again, we've noticed a few problems with the van that I need to get sorted before the weekend, which is in a few days' time when we go away for our sort of our main vacation for the summer with the kids. So what I'll do is I'll go through each issue that we've got. I'd say 3 are minor, but just need fixing, and 1's a bit more serious. Not sure how it sort of happened, but again, that relates to the fridge, and I'll show you exactly that in a bit more detail in a second. So like I say, I'll give you a bit of a walk around, show you where the problems are, and then I'll show you how exactly I'm going to go about fixing them. So the first issue I noticed was actually with this top piece, and I think that may have been caused by me leaning on this. So when it's in storage, obviously we've got items here and here, and I often sort of lean over to pull the curtains once it's actually back in the storage place, and I often sort of put my hand on here and lean forwards. Not on purpose, but yeah, obviously it's caused a problem, because what I've noticed is I couldn't actually get this back to actually sort of being straight level around the whole piece. And what I noticed was, as you can see, it's come away in here. Now yes, it's only pinned in the factory, but I'm gonna have to do something with this, probably put some kind of glue in there and get that back to sort of sticking where it needs to be, because otherwise this is never going to come back to being where it needs to be. And what I can do is, if I push that in, you can see it's sort of almost there, not quite, but yeah, as soon as you push it, away it goes. So that's job number 1 we need to have a look at. So job number 2 relates to the actual tap. So when you move this, you can see all the bottom plate is moving around. So I'm going to need to get underneath and actually get that tightened up, so again that stays in place. Now with the fridge, the other item is the actual, I think it's quite common, the spring has gone in that. So obviously if you were to hit a bump or anything, there's a chance that this could unlatch, open up when you're on the move. So I've got to get a replacement spring. But something else I've noticed, which is probably the more serious thing, is when we actually arrived on site, I noticed this black piece had fallen off. Now to start with, I wasn't actually sure what that was until I sort of looked around, and then noticed that our fridge has completely moved and is actually coming out. So yes, I'm going to need to have a look exactly what's going on there, what's caused that to come out, and then get this trim back in place. But yeah, a bit of a strange one. So obviously these are just stuck on, this is a bit of trim, but obviously we don't want this moving around, because obviously it's connected to your electric, it's connected to your gas. So yeah, you certainly don't want any issues where you've allowed it to come out any further. So yes, we'll be looking at that. So as you can see from the repairs, hopefully this isn't going to be too seriously. The front one, that should just be a case of gluing and pinning, and then let that set, and then hopefully that will resolve that issue. So again, we'll get to that first. Obviously the sink is just going to be a case of being more awkward, finding the right tools to be able to get underneath and actually get that tightened up so that doesn't move around, but again should be pretty straightforward. The spring, I'm just waiting for the postman, and actually in this case post lady, to actually turn up with the replacement part that I need, and then I can get that fitted. That's just sort of 2 screws out, put that in, so that will stop anything sort of potentially opening unexpectedly when we're on the travels. And then we'll get to actually having a look at the fridge and try to work out why that's actually moved in from its original location. But like I say, nothing too seriously, but just little jobs that we need to get sorted before our next trip. So let's get cracking. So the first job, I'm going to use some epoxy, and what this is just 2-part glue. You squeeze it out and then mix it together, and then you've probably got a couple of minutes to get it in place, everything set up before it starts going off. What you don't want to do is get it sort of roughly in place and be moving it around after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, because then it'll start losing its strength, because obviously it'll start going off. So work out what you're going to do and how before mixing this up. But you shouldn't need a lot, I don't think. Well, to be fair, there's not a lot left, so we get this mixed up and get it put in place. Rightio, so in terms of getting this in, I'm going to open it up a bit more. Remember, you don't need to go mad with this stuff. It is a case of adding it in, and you don't want it dripping down onto any other pieces of wood, because obviously this flexes based on what you're going to be doing with the table, whether you're extending it and so forth. It will go off pretty strong. Rightio, so I've put the glue, as you saw, in the gap. I haven't gone mad, like I say, just enough so when it does make contact it will stick in place. I've pulled this bit down, and what I've been able to do is just get it so it pinches where it needs to be. It's not excessive in terms of glue, we've got nothing dripping down from inside. And then just to finish off, what I've done is just put this clamp in place, so I've leveled it up exactly where I want it to be, and obviously I'll leave that for a good few hours. I know it says 5-minute epoxy, but even so, it's better to leave it for longer than shorter, just so it gets that really good bond. So, and again, this will keep it in place in terms of the positioning. So hopefully in a few hours we can come back, take this off, and that will have that little job resolved. Rightio, job number 2. So when it comes to the sink, how these normally work from underneath, you've normally got like a C-clip that goes round, and then you'll have like a long thread that goes up into the tap. It will go through the C-clip. Obviously the C-clip is there is to add the tension underneath, so this doesn't move around, or the base doesn't, and then you've got a bolt that goes along the thread and then tightens it all up. And because obviously the thread goes into the main tap, and you've got the C-clip, that is then going to pinch all this together. But what you may find is, because of the thread is normally sort of this length, and the bolt's quite small, you may find that you won't have a long enough bit to go up on underneath and then tighten it up. So you might need to do that with some kind of adjustable spanner or spanner, if you haven't. But again, yeah, they're no different than what you'd have in your house, but that's the principle of how these work. And obviously, like anything else, by moving it backwards and forwards over time, they eventually come loose. Yeah, no, it should be okay, but let's get underneath and just see what we can do in that space. Right, yeah, apologies for all the mess. To make life a little bit easier, what's probably the most sensible thing to do here is actually take the drawer out, unless you're okay, because what obviously the bit we need to get to is up in that corner. So if you took the drawer out, obviously you get to what you need, which is up there. So like with any drawer, you should just have the 2 screws, one either side, and once you've undone these, if you move it back in and hold your finger there, the drawer should just slide out. Rightio, so that is the drawer out, and then you can see now a bit more easier what I was talking about. So this is your C-clip that goes round, here's your threaded, and there's your bolt that needs tightening up slightly, so getting into here is a little bit easier with that drawer removed. But yeah, we'll get it tightened up and we'll take another look. So for us it was an 11mm little spanner, and again you can get these. This is only a cheap set that I've probably got from Aldi or something like that, so nothing really expensive, but worth having as a good item, because they're quite small, they're not the average sort of 4-length ones. And then there's your nut that's come off. But what I have noticed is this is the C-clip sort of washer, and yeah, as you can see it's pretty bent. So yeah, I'm going to straighten that up a little bit. And obviously somebody's put that in there, tightened it up and given it probably a bit too much welly, to be fair. But yeah, we'll sort that out and then get that back in place. So I have managed to straighten this one out. I had this one as just as a spare, just because I had it in the house before. So I'm going to put this back together and get that in. But this time around I'm just going to add this washer, because ultimately what happens is, obviously you've only got this small surface here, and as you tighten this up as you go harder and harder, obviously eventually that's why it was bent before, it comes in. So what I'm hoping to do is with this extra piece, and there's plenty of thread on there, I just want to help improve that to stop that actually bending. So hopefully it'll look something like that once it goes back in. Worst case, it will look something like that. But again, I'm hoping that washer will just give me an extra bit of protection. But what you don't want to go is too big on this washer, because obviously you're going to have the two pipes coming up in here. If you go for a large washer, when you actually tighten that up, you could then damage the actual two pipes and cause that to leak. So I don't want to put you off, but again, just get the right size, and that looks about perfect. Just to add that additional bit of strength and stop this happening in the future. So that's the two C-clips and the washer put in place, and the rubber grommet. So again, hopefully that'll give it a little bit more protection than what it had, and hopefully it'll last for the foreseeable future, but only time will tell. But anyway, that's a nice little job done under there. A little bit tight, but we got there in the end. Whenever you're working in these sort of spaces, just be aware of what else is actually in here. The last thing you want to do is damage any sort of regulators that you may have, whether they're gas or water, and just make sure you don't knock any of the valve switches, because again, that will cause you a headache, because you probably didn't realize you've done it, and then when you go to use it, you don't know where the fault is. So yeah, just be careful about what else is actually in these areas that you're working in. Rightio, perfect, no more sloppiness there. Happy with that. So that is item number 2 ticked off the list. On to item 3. So when it comes to the fridge, it's just the 2 screws that you actually undo, and then this is the part that you're left with, and the spring will go in here. So we'll just take this apart and we'll get it replaced. Rightio, so when you unscrew it, obviously you've got your 2 screws, that will come out and then it will release this. Now what I've found here is the spring is actually in, but what you can actually do with this is when you get it out the actual fridge, you can undo this top piece, get it in place. So that's what it should look like. The 2 lugs are at the bottom of the plastic, so first the spring is obviously going up here, and then you've got this part. Now what I found is if you do this corner first, you can get this bit lined up for where the spring needs to be. Once that's in place, you can then just lever that back and clip it in, and then that's as simple as it needs to be. Then it just moves back and forth to test, and then it's just about reseating that and putting the 2 screws in, and you should be good to go. And if all is working as expected, you should have a springy catch again. Lovely jubbly. So I'm not sure why this has moved. I don't know if I've hit something quite hard on the left hand side and it's jolted the Caravan and it's pushed this out. I'm not entirely sure. As you can see, it's definitely moved because it's coming past where it needs to be, and it's knocked out this trim going up, and like I said, it's knocked out this. And what I can see here is, from the looks of it, I don't know if you can see that, but there is a screw there, so obviously that corresponds to these plastic rivets as protectors. So I'm guessing I can pop those off, and then behind those are those screws. But looking at how they work, it doesn't look like they actually screw like into the wood a great deal. I think they more like just pierce it just enough to keep it in place, because you don't actually have too much in terms of the thickness of the wood it would go into before it would come through the other side. So I think the idea is it just sort of, yeah, locks it in place, and then you put the trim in just to keep it where it needs to be. So what I'll do first is, yeah, get those caps off, see if I can loosen those screws up, and then get this back into the position it needs to be in. So it is what I expected. Once you remove the caps, you can get to the screws, and the screws are only piercing the wood enough to just jam it in place. So with the 4 doing that, it keeps the fridge in place. And I'm guessing this bottom one was loose, and the same with the other side. So I think it's just then by then it not having anything there, it's just kicked the bottom out, and I've just managed to use my big fat foot just to lever it back into place, which then allow me to push the trim back in to where it needs to be, going back up. Rightio, so my fridge back in place where it needs to be. So hopefully that's not going to move. Like I say, it's just a case of they've worked themselves loose over a period of time, but needs a good clean before the next one. But then that is another task ticked off the list. Happy days. Rightio, so that's the 4 repairs done. I wasn't too sure how well each one was going to go. I was hoping they'd be pretty straightforward, and actually they ended up being straightforward, so that was a tick in the box for those. Obviously we started off with the front, get all that repaired, that's all glued in place and now aligned to where it needs to be, so it doesn't sort of kick out at the back. But that's something we'll watch if needs be later on. If anything else happens in that way, I'm guessing the next step would be to take that apart and having to screw it in place. But I think the 5-minute box will be fine. There's not too much pressure actually on that, so I'm hoping that'll be a long-term item resolved. Obviously the tap, that was, yeah, rock solid now. That extra support in there I think's done it, yeah, in terms of it moving in the future. It didn't have to double up. I think if anything on there, I'd say put a washer just to allow for when you're tightening it up, just so it doesn't pinch and then allow it to bow. It just gives it that extra protection. So again, find the right size if you have that in future, but I think once you've done that, straightened it out, put it back into place, I think that's going to be a winner in terms of keeping that long term where it needs to be. The fridge, again, I wasn't sure exactly how that was working. Obviously it worked out that, yeah, I think it was at least 3 of the bolts, or 2 definitely, and 1 was on its way, and then there's only 1 keeping it in place realistically, which is why only the bottom really kicked out, and then the other side was sort of at an angle. So once you got the 4 washers out, the plastic washers, you were able to then unscrew it, get it back into the right alignment, get the beading in place, and then once you're happy, then just put the screws back in. But as I said, they don't pierce straight through the wood, because otherwise they'd come through pretty quickly. So the idea is they just tighten up enough just to sort of pinch it either side. But again, another little job done. If the fridge had moved a lot more in terms of all 4, I would be then opening the hatches on the other side, on the outer side of the Caravan, and just checking the connections, A, the gas, B, the electric sort of thing, because obviously, yeah, it would have pulled that, and it might have got to the stage where it's actually either broken the connection on either. So definitely worth having a look at in terms of, yeah, just for that safety. But with gas, you would have smelt it, and electric obviously wouldn't turn on or shorted, so again you'd blown a fuse. So things to double check if you get to that point. But like I said, the fridge didn't fall out, it just kicked out at the bottom, so I was happy with what was happening there. And obviously with the spring itself, that's just finished off in terms of just making sure the door latches perfectly, and again just 2 screws out and in with a new replacement. But again, they're the kind of things, certainly the springs are worth having in your spares box going forwards, because they do seem to go quite frequently, so having a couple of those to hand probably would be recommended. But that's it for this week. If you've liked the content, hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you can consider subscribing, liking and sharing as always, and yeah, I will see you on the next one. Cheers all.